The concert hall was packed that evening. Every single seat was filled with people dressed in their finest clothes. Women wore elegant dresses and men had on suits and ties. The air smelled like expensive perfume mixed with the old wood of the theater. Everyone was talking in hushed, excited voices. They had paid good money to be here. Some had traveled from different cities just for this one night. Vincent stood backstage looking at himself in the mirror. He straightened his black bow tie for the third time. His hands were steady, but his mind was racing through the pieces he was about to play. At 42 years old, he had performed in front of thousands of people more times than he could count. But tonight felt different somehow. Maybe it was because this was Vienna, the heart of classical music. Or maybe it was because he knew his parents were sitting in the audience, finally getting to see him perform in one of the world's most famous concert halls. 20 years. That's how long he had been doing this. 20 years of practice, performances, and living out of suitcases. He had given up so much to get here. Relationships, stability, even simple things like having a normal sleep schedule. But as he heard the orchestra tuning their instruments on the other side of the curtain, he knew it had all been worth it. A stage manager knocked on his door. 5 minutes, sir. Vincent took a deep breath and walked toward the stage entrance. He could hear the audience settling down. The lights were dimming. This was it. He stepped out onto the stage and immediately, applause filled the massive hall. The sound bounced off the golden walls and the ornate ceiling. He bowed, walked to the grand piano sitting in the center of the stage and adjusted the bench to the perfect height. As he sat down, something caught his attention. In the third row, slightly to the left, there was a young guy who looked completely out of place. Everyone around him was sitting up straight, hands folded politely in their laps. But this kid was slouched in his seat wearing a hoodie and jeans. His sneakers looked worn out and he kept shifting around like he couldn't get comfortable. Vincent tried to ignore it. He placed his hands over the keys, ready to begin. But then he heard it. A whisper. Then another one. The young man was talking to the person next to him. Not quietly either. In a concert hall where you could hear a pin drop, this was like someone shouting. People around the kid were turning to look. An elderly woman in a pearl necklace gave him a sharp look. A man in glasses leaned forward and whispered something that was probably not very kind. But the young guy didn't seem to notice or care. He kept talking, gesturing with his hands like he was explaining something important. Vincent felt his jaw tighten. He had dealt with rude audience members before, but usually they at least tried to be respectful once the performance started. He looked over at the conductor, who gave him a concerned glance. Security guards were standing by the walls ready to step in if needed. For a moment, Vincent considered just starting to play. Usually, once the music began, people quieted down. But something about this situation bothered him. This wasn't just someone who had coughed or whose phone had gone off by accident. This was deliberate disruption. And everyone in the audience could feel it. The tension in the room was growing. Then an idea popped into his head. It was risky. It could backfire completely. But Vincent had always believed that music should be for everyone, not just the wealthy people who could afford expensive tickets. Maybe this was a chance to prove that. He stood up from the piano bench. The audience went completely silent, confused about what was happening. This wasn't part of the program. Vincent walked to the front of the stage, his polished shoes clicking on the wood floor. He cleared his throat and spoke into the silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice calm but loud enough to reach the back of the hall. "Before we begin tonight's performance, I'd like to say something." He paused, looking directly at the young man in the third row. The kid had finally stopped talking and was staring back at him with wide eyes. "Classical music can seem intimidating," Vincent continued. "I know that. The formal dress codes, the expensive tickets, the unwritten rules about when to clap and when to stay silent. It can make people feel like they don't belong here." Some people in the audience nodded. Others looked confused about where this was going. "But here's the truth," Vincent said, a small smile forming on his face. "Music belongs to everyone. It doesn't care if you're wearing a tuxedo or a hoodie. It doesn't care if you learned about it in a fancy school or taught yourself on a beat-up keyboard in your bedroom." The young man in the hoodie had stopped moving completely. He was listening now, really listening. "So I have a proposal," Vincent said, and this is where his idea got really crazy. "Anyone here tonight who thinks they understand music better than I do, anyone who thinks they could do a better job up here, I invite you to come on stage and show us." The audience gasped. This was absolutely not what anyone had expected. The conductor looked like he might faint. The security guard straightened up, ready for whatever was about to happen. Vincent knew he was taking a huge gamble. He could be making himself look like a fool in front of 2,000 people. His reputation could take a hit. The critics sitting in the front rows were probably already writing their reviews in their heads, and not good ones. But something told him this was the right thing to do. Call it instinct. Call it 20 years of reading audiences. Call it whatever you want. Vincent just knew that this moment was important somehow. The silence in the hall was deafening. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Would someone actually take him up on his offer? Would the young man in the hoodie say something back? Or would this just become an awkward moment that everyone would forget about once the music started? Vincent stood there, his heart beating fast but his expression calm. He had thrown down the challenge. Now he had to see if anyone would pick it up. The young man in the third row was looking down at his hands. His face had gone red. People around him were staring, some with curiosity, others with judgment. An older gentleman a few seats away was shaking his head, clearly disapproving of the whole situation. Then, slowly, the young man stood up. The audience let out a collective gasp. This was actually happening. Someone was taking the famous pianist up on his challenge. Security guards took a step forward, but Vincent held up his hand, stopping them. He wanted to see where this would go. The young man started walking down the aisle toward the stage. His worn sneakers made soft squeaking sounds on the polished floor. Every eye in the concert hall was on him. Some people looked shocked. Others looked amused, like they were about to witness an embarrassing moment. Vincent watched him approach, and for the first time since making his bold announcement, he wondered if he had just made a terrible mistake. The young man reached the stage steps and hesitated. For a moment, Vincent thought he might turn around and go back to his seat. But then he climbed up one step at a time, until he was standing on the same stage where some of the greatest musicians in history had performed. Up close, Vincent could see more details. The kid's hoodie had a small tear near the pocket. His jeans were faded and looked like they had been washed 100 times. But it was his eyes that caught Vincent's attention. They weren't the eyes of someone trying to cause trouble. They were nervous, yes, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like hunger. "What's your name?" Vincent asked quietly, so only the young man could hear. "Daniel." The kid replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "How old are you, Daniel?" 19, Vincent nodded. He could feel the audience getting restless behind them. Someone coughed. Another person shifted in their seat. They were all waiting to see what would happen next. Would this be a disaster? Would security have to escort this kid off the stage? The whole evening was hanging in the balance, so, Vincent said louder now so the audience could hear, "You've accepted my challenge." "That's brave." Daniel didn't say anything. He just stood there, hands shoved deep in his hoodie pocket, looking at the floor. "Tell us about yourself," Vincent encouraged. "Where are you from?" Daniel looked up at the audience. 2,000 faces stared back at him. Vincent could see his throat move as he swallowed hard. I'm from here." "Vienna," Daniel said. His accent was local, but his voice shook. "I'm sorry for talking during your performance. That was rude. I got excited when I saw the program. Chopin is my favorite." Someone in the audience laughed. Not a mean laugh, but one of those uncomfortable laughs people make when they don't know how to react to a situation. "Chopin is excellent," Vincent said warmly. "What do you do, Daniel? Are you a student?" The young man's face changed. Something painful flashed across it. "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore. I don't really do anything right now. I've been sleeping in shelters mostly, sometimes in the subway station when it's too crowded." The laughter stopped immediately. The entire concert hall went dead silent. This wasn't what anyone had expected to hear. Vincent felt his chest tighten. Homeless, this 19-year-old kid was homeless. "How did you get a ticket to tonight's performance?" Vincent asked gently. "A lady outside gave it to me," Daniel said. "She had an extra one and saw me looking at the posters. She said everyone deserves to hear beautiful music at least once." His eyes got watery. She was really kind. Vincent could see people in the audience exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable. Others looked genuinely touched. He noticed a woman in the front row wiping her eyes. The security guards were still standing by the stage, watching carefully. The head guard caught Vincent's eye and made a small gesture, silently asking if he should remove Daniel. Vincent shook his head no. That was very generous of her, Vincent said. So you came to hear Chopin, and then I called you out for talking. I apologize for embarrassing you. No, Daniel said quickly. You were right. I shouldn't have been talking. It's just, I haven't heard live classical music in so long, and when I saw you walk out, I recognized you from YouTube videos. I got excited and started telling the person next to me about this performance you did in Paris last year, the way you played Nocturne in E-flat major. He paused, searching for words. It was like you understood something about that piece that I'd never heard before. Vincent was surprised. This kid knew his work. He wasn't just some random troublemaker. You watch classical piano performances on YouTube? Vincent asked. Whenever I can get to the library and use their computers, Daniel said. Or sometimes coffee shops have free Wi-Fi. I watch everything I can find. Not just you. Lots of pianists. I study how they interpret different pieces, how they use dynamics, the way they phrase things. The audience was completely silent now, hanging on every word. This wasn't going the way anyone had thought it would. Vincent made a decision. It was probably crazy. His manager would definitely have a heart attack. But something told him to trust his instincts. Daniel, he said, you came up here because I challenged anyone who thought they could do better. So here's the piano. He gestured to the beautiful grand piano sitting center stage. Show us what you've got. Daniel's eyes went wide. What? No, I can't. I shouldn't have come up here. This was stupid. I'll just go back to my seat. Why not? Vincent asked. Because I'm not. Daniel gestured at himself, at his worn clothes, at the fancy concert hall around them. I don't belong up here. But you know music, Vincent said. You study performances. You have opinions about interpretation and dynamics. That means you understand it. So play something for us. I can't just play one of the most expensive pianos in the world in front of all these people, Daniel said, his voice rising slightly. What if I mess up? What if I'm terrible? Vincent smiled. Then we'll all have a good story to tell. Come on, you're already up here. Everyone's watching. Might as well give it a shot. Daniel looked at the piano like it was a wild animal that might bite him. Then he looked at Vincent. Then back at the audience. Vincent could practically see the war going on inside the kid's head. What should I play? Daniel asked finally. Whatever you want, Vincent said. Something you know by heart. I don't have sheet music, you don't need it. Just play from memory. Daniel walked slowly toward the piano bench. His hands were shaking. He sat down carefully like he was afraid the bench might break under him. The audience watched in complete silence. You could have heard a feather land on the floor. He adjusted the bench slightly, the same way Vincent had done earlier. Then he placed his hands over the keys. His fingers were thin and his nails needed cutting, but his hand position was correct. Whoever had taught him properly. Vincent stepped back to give him space. He could see the conductor in the orchestra pit looking completely confused. This was definitely not in the program, but Vincent didn't care. Something about this moment felt important, like they were all about to witness something special. Daniel took a deep breath. His hands stopped shaking. And then he started to play. The first notes rang out through the concert hall, clear and pure. Vincent's eyebrows shot up. The audience leaned forward in their seats. Security guards stopped moving, because Daniel wasn't playing some simple tune. He wasn't playing chopsticks or a basic scale. He was playing Liszt, one of the most technically difficult pieces ever written. And he was playing it perfectly. Vincent stood frozen in place. He knew this piece. La Campanella, the bell. It was one of those compositions that separated good pianists from great ones, the kind of piece that required years of dedicated practice and natural talent working together. And this homeless kid in a torn hoodie was playing it like he had written it himself. Daniel's fingers flew across the keys. The rapid notes came out crystal clear, each one distinct and perfect. His left hand provided the deep, resonant bass while his right hand danced through the impossibly fast melody. The piece demanded complete control and precision, and Daniel had both. But it wasn't just technical skill. That's what stunned Vincent the most. Anyone could learn the notes with enough practice. But Daniel was doing something more. He was feeling the music. When the piece called for power, his whole body leaned into it. When it needed delicacy, His touch became so light it seemed like his fingers were barely touching the keys at all. The audience sat in absolute silence. All those fancy people in their expensive clothes, who had come expecting to judge and critique, were now witnesses to something none of them had anticipated. Vincent could see faces in the front row. A man with a gray beard had his mouth hanging open. A young woman was crying. An elderly couple were holding hands, completely mesmerized. The piece built toward its climax. Daniel's hands were moving so fast they were almost a blur. Sweat had formed on his forehead. His whole body was moving with the music, swaying slightly, completely lost in the performance. This wasn't someone showing off. This was someone who lived and breathed music, who needed it the way other people needed air. Then something unexpected happened. As Daniel approached the final section of La Campanella, he didn't play it the traditional way. He shifted. The classical melody was still there, but he started weaving in something else: jazz chords, improvised runs. He was taking Liszt and making it his own, blending the classical foundation with modern elements that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Vincent felt goosebumps rise on his arms. In 20 years of performing, he had heard hundreds of pianists play La Campanella, but he had never heard it like this. Daniel was breaking rules that most classical musicians wouldn't dare touch. And it was brilliant. The music filled every corner of the massive concert hall. It bounced off the ornate ceiling and the golden walls. It wrapped around every person sitting in the audience. Some of the orchestra members had stood up from their seats to see better. The conductor had tears running down his face. Daniel played the final notes with a gentleness that made them sound like raindrops on glass. Then silence, complete and total silence. His hand stayed on the keys for a moment as if he didn't want to let go. Then slowly he lifted them and placed them in his lap. For what felt like forever, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The silence stretched on and on. Daniel started to look nervous again, like maybe he had done something wrong. Then someone started clapping. It was the elderly woman in the pearl necklace, the same one who had given Daniel a dirty look earlier. She stood up from her seat and applauded. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet. The sound was deafening. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, whistling, shouting. Some were still crying. Vincent walked over to Daniel, who looked completely overwhelmed. The kid's eyes were wide, and he seemed unsure if this was really happening. Vincent pulled him into a tight hug. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Vincent asked, his own eyes wet with tears. Daniel pulled back, wiping his face with his sleeve. "I know, it's a long story. We have time," Vincent said. "The intermission is coming up anyway." The applause continued for what must have been 5 full minutes. Daniel stood there awkwardly, not knowing what to do with his hands. Vincent gestured for him to bow, and when he did, the cheering got even louder. Finally, the audience started to settle down. Vincent spoke into the microphone that had been set up near the piano. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think we can all agree that was extraordinary," he said. "We're going to take our scheduled intermission now. Please enjoy the lobby, get some refreshments. We'll be back in 20 minutes. The curtain came down and Vincent immediately led Daniel backstage. The young man was shaking again, but this time it wasn't from nerves. It was adrenaline. Vincent knew that feeling well. The rush that came after performing, when your whole body was electric with energy. "Sit down," Vincent said, pointing to a chair in his dressing room. "Do you want some water? Something to eat?" "Water would be good," Daniel said quietly. Vincent handed him a bottle and watched as the kid drank half of it in one go. Then Daniel set it down and put his head in his hands. "I can't believe I just did that," he mumbled. "I can't believe it either," Vincent said honestly. "Daniel, I need to know, where did you learn to play like that?" Daniel looked up. His eyes were red. "Juilliard," he said simply. Vincent felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "The Juilliard School? In New York?" "Yeah, I got a full scholarship when I was 16. They said I was one of the most talented students they'd seen in years." Daniel's voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. "I studied there for 2 years. Best 2 years of my life." "What happened?" Vincent asked, even though part of him wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "My mom got sick," Daniel said. "Really sick. Cancer. She was back here in Vienna and there was nobody else to take care of her. My dad left when I was little. No siblings. No other family." He picked at a loose thread on his jeans. "So I came home. Took care of her. The school said I could come back once things settled down, but she didn't make it, Vincent finished softly. Daniel shook his head. She fought for 2 years. I was with her until the end, and by the time she passed, I had been gone from Juilliard too long. Lost my scholarship, lost my spot, and we had sold everything to pay for her treatment. The apartment, the car, her jewelry, everything. When she died, I had nothing left. That was when? Vincent asked. 2 years ago. I've been trying to survive since then. Worked some odd jobs for a while, but it's hard when you don't have an address or clean clothes for interviews. Eventually ended up on the streets. Been there for about 6 months now. Vincent sat down heavily in another chair. This talented, brilliant young man had given up his dreams to take care of his dying mother. And now he was sleeping in shelters and subway stations. Do you still practice? Vincent asked. Whenever I can, Daniel said. There are some public pianos around the city. In train stations and parks. I play there when nobody's around to kick me out. And I watch videos online whenever I get internet access. That's how I keep learning, keep improving, because... His voice broke slightly. Because even though everything fell apart, I can't stop loving music. It's the only thing I have left. Vincent felt something shift inside him. He had been given so many opportunities in his life. Good teachers, supportive parents, financial stability. This kid had more raw talent than most professional pianists Vincent knew, and he was wasting away on the streets. How would you like to play the second half of tonight's concert with me? Vincent asked suddenly. Daniel's head snapped up. What? A duet, you and me. We'll play together. These people need to hear you again. I can't do that, Daniel said, shaking his head rapidly. This is your concert. Your night. I've already disrupted it enough. You haven't disrupted anything, Vincent said firmly. You've made it better. You've reminded everyone in that audience what music is really about. Not fancy clothes or expensive tickets, but talent, passion, and heart. And you have all three. Daniel stared at him like he was crazy. Maybe he was. Vincent's manager was probably having a breakdown somewhere. But Vincent didn't care. This felt right. Please, Vincent said. Let me do this for you. Daniel's eyes filled with tears again. He nodded, unable to speak. Vincent smiled. Good. Now let's figure out what we're going to play together. The 20-minute intermission felt like it lasted 5 seconds. Vincent and Daniel were backstage, quickly deciding what piece they would perform together. Vincent suggested several options, but Daniel knew them all. Every single one. He could discuss the different interpretations, the challenging sections, even the historical context of when they were written. How about Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2? Vincent suggested. The part for 4 hands. Do you know it? Daniel's face lit up. The Tarantella movement. I used to play that with my teacher at Juilliard. She played the primo part and I played the secondo. Perfect, Vincent said. Except this time you'll play primo. I'll take secondo. But that's the more prominent part, Daniel protested. You should play that. Daniel, Vincent said, looking him straight in the eye. Tonight isn't about me. It's about you. These people need to hear what you can do. Trust me on this. Before Daniel could argue further, there was a knock on the dressing room door. Vincent's manager burst in, his face red and his hair disheveled. Vincent, what on earth are you doing? He hissed, trying to keep his voice down. This isn't what we planned. The program is already printed. The critics are here. You can't just change everything because some random kid showed up. That random kid just gave the performance of a lifetime, Vincent said calmly. And I'm going to perform with him in the second half. The decision is made, but who is he? Where did he come from? We don't know anything about him. I know enough, Vincent said. Now please, we need a few more minutes to prepare. His manager looked like he wanted to argue more, but something in Vincent's expression stopped him. He left the room, muttering under his breath about insurance and liability and reputation. Maybe this is a bad idea, Daniel said once they were alone again. I don't want to cause problems for you. The only problem would be not letting people hear you play, Vincent said. Now come on. Let's run through a bit of it so we can get our timing right. They spent the last few minutes practicing on the piano in Vincent's dressing room. It was much smaller than the grand piano on stage, but it worked for their purposes. Daniel's muscle memory kicked in immediately. Even though he hadn't played this piece in 2 years, his fingers remembered every note. What impressed Vincent even more was how Daniel listened. In a duet, especially one as complex as this, both pianists needed to be in perfect sync. They had to breathe together, anticipate each other's moves, blend their sounds into one unified performance. Daniel did all of this naturally, like he had been playing with Vincent for years instead of minutes. Too soon, the stage manager knocked again. "Places, gentlemen. 1 minute." Vincent and Daniel walked toward the stage. As they waited in the wings, Vincent could hear the audience settling back into their seats. The lights were dimming. The murmur of conversation faded away. "You ready?" Vincent asked. Daniel took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked out onto the stage together. The audience erupted in applause the moment they saw Daniel. People were standing again, cheering before they had even played a single note. Daniel looked overwhelmed, almost frozen by the response. Vincent walked to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your warm welcome. For the second half of tonight's performance, I'm honored to be joined by Daniel, who you heard earlier. We'll be playing Rachmaninoff's Suite No. 2 for 4 hands, the Tarantella movement." More applause. Vincent gestured to the piano bench and he and Daniel sat down side by side. It was tight. Piano benches weren't really designed for 2 adult men. Their shoulders touched. Vincent could feel Daniel trembling slightly. "Breathe," Vincent whispered. "Just feel the music. Forget about everything else." Daniel nodded. They positioned their hands over the keys. Vincent counted silently in his head. 1, 2, 3. They began. The Tarantella was a wild, energetic piece. It moved fast, with both pianists' hands flying across the keyboard, sometimes crossing over each other, sometimes playing in perfect unison. It required complete trust because one wrong move could throw the entire performance off. Daniel started tentatively, but within the first few measures, something magical happened. He stopped thinking and started playing from instinct. His confidence grew with every passing second. Vincent could feel it in the way Daniel's body relaxed, the way his touch on the keys became more assured. They moved together like they had been performing as a duo for decades. When Vincent needed to reach for the high notes, Daniel pulled back to give him space. When their hands crossed in the middle of the keyboard, they navigated around each other perfectly. The music flowed out of the piano in waves, filling the concert hall with its joyful, dancing rhythm. The audience was transfixed. This wasn't just 2 people playing the same piece. This was conversation through music. Vincent would play a phrase and Daniel would answer it. Daniel would introduce a new dynamic and Vincent would match it. They pushed each other, challenged each other, elevated each other. Vincent glanced sideways at Daniel during a particularly fast section. The young man's face was glowing. All the sadness, all the hardship, all the pain of the past 2 years seemed to melt away. In this moment, he wasn't homeless. He wasn't struggling. He was just a musician doing what he was born to do. The piece built toward its frantic finale. Both of them were playing as fast as humanly possible, their fingers blurring across the keys. The energy in the room was electric. People in the audience were on the edges of their seats. Some were even holding their breath, then the final chord. They struck it together perfectly in sync. The sound rang out through the hall and slowly faded into silence. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire audience exploded. People weren't just standing. They were jumping to their feet. The applause was so loud it was almost painful. People were shouting, crying, hugging each other. The orchestra members were on their feet too, clapping and cheering. Vincent and Daniel stood up and bowed together. Vincent grabbed Daniel's hand and raised it high, making sure everyone knew that this young man deserved all the recognition. The applause got even louder. They bowed again and again. The standing ovation went on for almost 10 minutes. People in the balcony were throwing flowers onto the stage. A man in the 3rd row was wiping his eyes with a handkerchief. The woman who had given Daniel her extra ticket was sobbing openly. Finally, they walked off stage. As soon as they were in the wings, Daniel collapsed into a chair. "I can't believe that just happened," he said, his voice shaking. "Did that really just happen?" "It happened," Vincent said, grinning. "And I recorded it on my phone during intermission when you didn't notice." The first performance. "We're going to share this online." "What? Why?" "Because people need to see this," Vincent said. "They need to know your story. They need to hear what you can do." "But I look terrible in these clothes," Daniel protested weakly. "You look like a musician," Vincent corrected. "A real one. Not someone playing dress-up." Vincent's manager appeared again, but this time he was smiling. "The critics are going crazy," he said. "I've never seen them react like this. They want interviews. Both of you. Later, Vincent said. First, I need to make some phone calls. Calls to who? Daniel asked. Vincent smiled. To people who need to hear about you. Starting with my old professor at Juilliard. Daniel's eyes widened. You went to Juilliard too? Class of 2005, Vincent said. And I still have connections there. Lots of them. For the first time since Vincent had met him, Daniel smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. And in that moment, Vincent knew that everything was about to change. Vincent posted the video that same night. He didn't overthink it. He just uploaded the recording of Daniel's solo performance to his official channel, with a simple caption explaining what had happened. The young homeless musician who crashed his concert and stunned everyone with his talent. Then he put his phone down and went to bed. When he woke up the next morning, his phone was dead. Not from battery loss. It had actually shut down from too many notifications coming in at once. After charging it for a few minutes, Vincent turned it on. His eyes went wide. The video had been viewed 8 million times. 8 million. In less than 12 hours. And it was still climbing. The comments section was flooded. People from all over the world were asking about Daniel. Who was he? Where was he now? How could they help? Several news outlets had already picked up the story. Morning shows were calling. Radio stations wanted interviews. Vincent immediately called Daniel. He had gotten the young man a hotel room for the night. It wasn't anything fancy, but it had a clean bed and a shower. Basic things that Daniel hadn't had regular access to in months. Have you seen the internet this morning? Vincent asked when Daniel answered. I don't have a phone, Daniel reminded him. Remember? Right, well, you're famous. Like really famous. The video has millions of views and it's still going up. Everyone wants to know your story. There was silence on the other end. Then Daniel's voice, very quiet. I don't know if I want to be famous. I just want to play music. I understand, Vincent said. But this attention could help you. It could open doors. Real opportunities. What kind of opportunities? Come to my hotel. I'll explain everything. An hour later, Daniel showed up at Vincent's suite. He was wearing the same clothes from the night before. The hotel had offered to wash them, but they were the only clothes he owned. Vincent made a mental note to fix that situation soon. Sit down, Vincent said, gesturing to the couch. I've been making calls all morning. I need to tell you what's happening. Daniel sat, looking nervous. Vincent noticed his hands were shaking slightly. First, Vincent began, I called my old professor at Juilliard. She remembers you. Said you were one of the most gifted students she ever taught. She was heartbroken when you had to leave. Professor Chen, Daniel said softly. She sent me a card when my mom died. I never responded because I didn't know what to say. Well, she wants to talk to you now. The school is willing to reinstate you. Full scholarship, just like before, and they'll provide housing this time. A small apartment near campus. Daniel's mouth fell open. What, are you serious? Completely serious. They want you back. You'd start in January, which gives you a few months to prepare. Tears started running down Daniel's face. He didn't try to wipe them away. I thought that door was closed forever. It's not closed, Vincent said gently. It's wide open. But there's more. More? Vincent pulled out his phone and showed Daniel the comments on the video. Thousands and thousands of them. People offering help, offering money, offering support. A famous concert hall in London had reached out, wanting Daniel to perform there. A recording studio in Berlin wanted to produce an album with him. 3 different music festivals had extended invitations. This is insane, Daniel whispered, scrolling through the messages. This can't be real. It's very real. And there's something else. Someone started a crowdfunding campaign for you. I didn't ask them to. They just did it on their own. People have been donating all night. How much? Daniel asked. Vincent turned his phone to show him. Daniel stared at the number. Then he started crying harder. Real body-shaking sobs. The kind of crying that comes from years of holding everything inside. $400,000, he choked out. How is this possible? Vincent sat down next to him. People connect with real stories. With real talent. You represent something that everyone wants to believe in. That no matter how hard life gets, if you have genuine gifts and keep working at them, things can turn around. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Vincent let him cry. Sometimes that's what people needed. To let out all the pain and fear and stress they'd been carrying. After a few minutes, Daniel looked up. His eyes were red and his face was blotchy, but he was smiling. So what do I do now? First, we get you some new clothes, Vincent said. Then we have lunch. A real lunch at a nice restaurant. Then we start planning your future. I don't know how to thank you, Daniel said. You didn't have to do any of this. Yes, I did, Vincent said firmly. Music isn't meant to be locked away in fancy concert halls for only wealthy people. It's meant to be shared, celebrated, and protected. You have a gift, Daniel. A real gift. And it would be a crime to let it go to waste because of circumstances beyond your control. They spent the afternoon taking care of practical things, getting Daniel some decent clothes, opening a bank account so the crowdfunding money could be transferred, setting up a phone so people could reach him, simple things that most people took for granted, but that Daniel hadn't had access to for months. Over the next few weeks, the video continued spreading. It hit 50 million views, then 100 million. News outlets around the world covered the story. Daniel appeared on talk shows, always humble and slightly overwhelmed by the attention. He performed at the London Concert Hall. Sold-out show, standing ovation. The reviews said he played with more emotional depth than musicians twice his age. He recorded his first album, a mix of classical pieces and his own jazz-influenced arrangements. It went platinum. But the most important moment came 3 months later. Daniel stood outside the Juilliard School in New York City. He had a backpack with his belongings. He had keys to a small apartment. He had a full scholarship and a future ahead of him. Vincent was there too. He had flown in to see Daniel off on his first day back. Nervous? Vincent asked. Terrified, Daniel admitted. What if I can't keep up? What if everyone expects too much because of everything that happened? You'll be fine, Vincent said. You've already been through the hardest part. Going back to school will be easy compared to what you survived. Daniel nodded. Then he turned to Vincent. I need to say something. You saved my life. Literally. If you hadn't invited me on that stage, I'd still be sleeping in subway stations. I'd probably have given up on music completely by now. You didn't just give me an opportunity. You gave me hope. Vincent felt his throat tighten. You saved yourself. I just opened a door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it. They hugged. Then Daniel picked up his backpack and walked toward the building. He paused at the entrance and looked back one more time. Vincent waved. Daniel waved back. Then he went inside. Vincent stood there for a minute watching the doors close behind him. His phone buzzed. Another interview request. Another performance invitation. The world wanted to hear Daniel's story over and over. But Vincent knew something that the media didn't always capture. This wasn't just a feel-good story about a homeless kid who got lucky. This was a story about talent that refused to die, about passion that survived even when everything else fell apart, and about how sometimes all someone needs is one person willing to take a chance on them. Vincent's joke that night in Vienna had been meant to prove a point about humility. Instead, it had revealed something much more important, that extraordinary talent exists in unexpected places, that the best musicians aren't always the ones with the most advantages, and that music, real music, doesn't care about your clothes or your address or your circumstances. It only cares about what's in your heart. 6 months later, Vincent received a package in the mail. Inside was a recording. Daniel had made it himself in one of Juilliard's practice rooms. A note was attached. This is the piece I've been working on. It's dedicated to you. Thank you for believing in me when nobody else did. Thank you for reminding me that music isn't about perfection. It's about truth. Your friend always, Daniel. Vincent listened to the recording 3 times in a row. It was beautiful, complex, honest. Everything that great music should be. He posted it on his channel with Daniel's permission. Within hours, it had 1 million views. People in the comments were crying, saying it was the most moving thing they'd ever heard. And Vincent smiled, because he knew that this was just the beginning. Daniel had decades of music ahead of him, decades of performances, compositions, and students he would inspire.